Retro.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the Armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
We're getting back into the Clone Wars with a look at episode 6 from season 3, which is titled The Academy. But before we go to school, Jay, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and before we get started?
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram, very conveniently, at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So again, this is episode 6 from season 3, which is called The Academy. Jay, if you could go ahead and give us the summary of the episode, please.
Absolutely. Ahsoka is sent to Mandalore to teach a class about the dangers of corruption at a leadership class academy on Mandalore. Her teaching inspires some of her students, led by Duchess Satine's nephew, Korkie, to investigate a food shortage, and they soon discover the black market on Mandalore still thrives. After bringing their findings to Duchess Satine, they are told to let her handle it. When they seek the help of Prime Minister Almec, he attempts to frame Satine and arrest the children and is revealed as one of the leaders of the black market. Ahsoka manages to defeat Almec and free Satine and the children after they are arrested before returning to Coruscant.
I like this episode, but I got some mixed thoughts about it, which we'll get into over the course of our discussion. But what do you think about this one overall, Jay?
Well, I was just glad to finally get some Ahsoka back in action here. It's been quite a long time since we've had any kind of even Jedi-centric, really, episode to speak of. But I think that it's a very interesting choice to put Ahsoka in the middle of all of this. But I guess it makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of, her age and the types of things that she is able to accomplish given her skills. And like you, it wasn't one of those that I guess kind of stuck with me so much as some of the other ones did, but it definitely sets up a lot of what's going to come to pass on Mandalore. So it's definitely a necessary type of setup.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with it being a setup. It was, it's just I don't know. It is good as a setup episode, but overall, it's not as impressive as an episode as some of the stuff that comes around it, I think, where with the previous 2 episodes, which were very political, and we spent a lot of time talking about how we appreciated them more after the discussions we had. Granted, this discussion's not done, but as I rewatched this ahead of this discussion, I just kind of walked away and like, I'm not sure that I appreciate this episode any more than I did the previous several times that I've watched it, even paying more attention to what's going on with this one. And maybe that's just because it is a necessary bridge to things to come in the future. There's so much more that happens on Mandalore over the rest of the series, and that's fine. But as for my money, Ahsoka was the best part of it, and it's good to see her because we were just talking about how the last episode didn't feature Obi-Wan, Anakin, or Ahsoka. Ahsoka was in the episode before that, but as a side character, and we've kind of been missing our big 3 in important roles for a while as we've gone through this rewatch here. So it was great to see her have a more central role in everything that was happening. It's funny, if you watch the featurette on this, or if you go to the website, the episode guide, and watch the featurette, Dave Filoni wearing a Robot Chicken t-shirt, I thought of you when I saw that, called this a Harry Potter episode in which there's something going on, and then rather it being, the adults are aware of it, but they don't get it taken care of. It's up to the kids there. And I could kind of see that, but it also just kind of reminded me of like Ewok Adventures where kids did things, and other episodes of the Clone Wars where the kids, Padawans are the heroes of the story and stuff like that. So I'm not sure Harry Potter really coined that type of a thing, but I get what he's saying.
Mhm.
So, and again, I'm fine with that. This is something we're used to. We've seen these type of things in various Amblin Entertainment movies with the Goonies and whatever, taking care of problems. But the question I have to ask you, Korkie Kryze, nephew of Satine, who in the world are his parents?
Okay, I'm laughing because we are so much of the same mind. Because in my personal notes to myself, I have Korkie Kryze. Who does he belong to?
Mm-hmm.
As a point for, our discussion. And because obviously he calls Satine Auntie Satine or Aunt Satine. And we know Bo-Katan is her sister, but she never had any kids. So yeah, whose kid is this? Like where's the sibling of Satine Kryze that this child belongs to? So
Yeah,
yeah, of course there's fan speculation out there that this could be the love child of Satine and Obi-Wan, and
I don't buy that.
we won't get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not on board with that. I think that's something that would have been addressed and taken advantage of by Lucasfilm if that was in fact the case. If you go to Wikipedia, because I was like, has anyone ever answered this, or was anyone in Lucasfilm ever spoken about? Because they usually collect it there, and Wikipedia just said that he was a scion of the Kryze clan, and that they noted Duchess Satine as her aunt, and of course Bo-Katan is her sister, but they didn't credit Korkie to either one of them. And
Hmm.
I don't think Bo-Katan has ever mentioned Korkie's name, as far as I'm aware. So I don't believe it's hers. And I would think if Korkie was Satine's child, more would have been made out of it over the course of the Clone Wars, and it never
Oh, for
was.
sure.
So
For sure. I just feel
it's a
like it's
mystery.
one of those kind of things where, in Star Wars, there's things that we just have and we don't really question a whole lot,
Oh, I'm
just like
questioning it now.
Anakin,
It's
Anakin being the Force child or whatever. But
right.
no, yeah, we're definitely questioning it now for sure. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it seems like the most likely answer is that this is not a pure aunt nephew relationship. That yes, they are related, but Korkie calls Satine Aunt Satine, even though it's probably not a sibling of Satine's son. That it's
Hmm.
like more like a cousin's child or something like that, and they just have that
Hmm.
type of relationship because you know down here in Texas and others the South, people call various and well in Asian cultures, people call others aunties all the time that aren't actually related by blood. So
Good
anyway,
point.
yeah, I don't know. At the end of this, I think every time I see this episode, I ask that question and I've never had gotten an answer. So um,
Inquiring minds want to know.
indeed. Okay. Well, so this episode begins with Anakin delivering Ahsoka for this mission, and she's not enthusiastic about it. But the logic behind it is that Yoda believed that only a young Padawan like Ahsoka could get through to these students, and so her job is to teach these kids about corruption, so that the I don't know. Does this setup make sense to you? The Ahsoka's going to go teach one class of students about corruption so that they're on the lookout, they're aware, and it's like potentially stops the spread of corruption. But in reality, it's like an undercover mission that Ahsoka's not ever really aware about when she gets there. I don't know. I have a little bit of a problem with the setup, but what are your thoughts?
Right, because at the end when Satine reveals that it was her and Padme's idea that she be sent there, a Padawan or a Jedi,
Mhm.
but ultimately that it would be Ahsoka. You would think that they would have at least let her in on that just a little bit to give her a bit of a leg up on, okay, well, if things go sideways, this is what you need to be aware of. So I don't think that she was mission briefed very well before she
Mhm.
went there and not really given a true, MO as to what her true role was. And, the fact that she was teaching these students about corruption being about the same age or maybe even younger than they are is kind of an interesting choice, albeit I can see what Yoda's saying in that they would relate to her being their age and being a Jedi. They would definitely look up to her, which obviously Korkie did from the very, very beginning. But I
Mhm.
just think it put Ahsoka at a little bit of a disadvantage, not being completely briefed on what was going on. What do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. And look, she stumbled into this mission. If there's an awful lot of faith that Satine and Padme are putting into Ahsoka being there, teaching these younglings get inspired to go investigate corruption. They find corruption, and then Ahsoka shows up to save the day. I mean, that's a big if. There's a whole
Right.
lot of, there's a whole lot of heavy lifting being done there that I don't think is really warranted in this plan there. Also, if you're Ahsoka and you're being told like you are the hope of Mandalore, you're going to go teach younglings. I know I'm being snarky, but please forgive me. There's other things about this episode I like. You're the hope of Mandalore. You're going to go there. You're going to relate to these students, and that's what's going to stop the spread of corruption. She's teaching 12 people, and then she leaves after
Right.
that. So, how big is the impact there? If these people were more important, like this is the future leader of this clan and this is the future leader of that clan and this person's destined to be the next prime minister, okay, great. But that's not what happened here. She's teaching one class and they're meeting on a daily, they meet like a half dozen times. Now I get it. The whole thing was a ruse. It's an undercover mission. But even then, it just doesn't, I would think anyone observing this would find it not entirely plausible there. So that's just my
And it
criticism.
is, yeah, and it's expecting an awful lot of these young kids to even put themselves in that position. But
Mhm.
I just find it really funny that the whole reason that they ultimately do is not so much that they're concerned about corruption in as much as they're hungry.
Yeah.
And their little teenage, metabolisms need a midnight snack. So let's go figure out what's happening to all of our food.
That's not there because of shortages. Is there
Right.
really a shortage? Let's go down to the docks and get a bag of chips. So,
And also too, it kind of begs the question. Obviously, Satine knew that there was shortages going on because, that was what we got into in the last episode and whatnot. But for her to not have a lot of the stuff being known to her and going on right underneath her nose, I get it. Almec was covering all of this stuff up and profiting from it. But at the same time, it's like, these are your people. She
yeah.
was obviously extremely involved in the last episode, as we said, more so than most leaders would be at her stature. But yet she had no clue that, any of this was going on. I don't know. It just seems a little disjointed for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give her a pass on some of that because she did ask Padme to have a Jedi brought in to investigate this. We saw that at the
Mhm.
end of the last episode. So she anticipated it. But as Dave Filoni points out in the episode guide and that featurette is that everyone in an important role close to Satine has betrayed her. Cal Merrick, the senator, Governor Vizsla, who's ends up leading Death Watch and tries to kill her.
Right.
And now Prime Minister Almec. And just having gone through, maybe she did suspect Almec, but just having gone through a previous corruption case in which he was aware of it, her sticking in her nose, she can't do it. Everyone knows that she's aware of it. She can't show up and
Mhm.
investigate these things. Everyone, she just publicly burned down a warehouse
Good
at the end of the
point.
last episode.
Yes.
And now she needs, which really hampers her abilities. I mean, it's a strong stance to take, but there's the Duchess. Guys, don't do anything suspicious. It's
Mhm.
she
Mhm.
burns down warehouses when she's upset. But again, it's just this notion that Anakin chides Ahsoka at the end of this episode when she's getting picked up from Mandalore about like, you thought it was a good idea to take these kids and investigate corruption. Dude, she wasn't the one that came up with the plan. She wasn't even told about the plan. She fell into the plan. This is exactly what you all wanted her to do, was to take down this
Mhm.
corruption ring here. So I don't know. Like I said, it's an important bridge episode because it does transition to things that are going to happen later in the series. It just has got some warts to it is all.
Mhm. Mhm. I do love what Ahsoka said, though, to Anakin, "Nothing less than you would have done."
Mhm.
And he gives her that little smirk like, "I'm proud of you."
Yeah, you got me. I can't stay mad at
Yep.
you, Snips. So, there are some other things about this episode I liked. I did like the message that Ahsoka was giving about corruption, about, defining it as putting one's own interests above those that you represent and that you serve. And that, it's our duty to watch our leaders closely and keep them honest and hold them accountable. and citizens should expose corrupt officials when it happens. So they get very inspired by that, and then they go out to look for corruption, and then when they attempt to expose it, it gets them in hot water. This is where their naivety shows through, because they go talk to Satine, and she is a little condescending about the whole thing, that, I don't think this is something you can handle, so please leave it to me. But she really knew that they weren't at that point. I mean, that's the only way this plan works, is if she knows Korkie and his friends were going to go do something else with this. Well, then they contact Almec, and he's like, oh, this is very troubling. Well, showing up at the Crown Plaza with your evidence and everybody who knows about this after dark.
Yeah.
And I'll take this all in. And then they're
Right.
surprised when he betrays them there.
Well, they're
Yeah.
young, and that's the thing. They're so easily manipulated in that way. And, obviously they were kind of manipulated to be inspired in the first place.
Mhm.
And then obviously manipulated, and due to their naivete, they just blindly trusted Almec and, thought that they were doing the right thing.
Mhm. Mhm. And then one thing that we forgot to mention off the top that comes into play here is that when Ahsoka is dropped off, she's not allowed to keep her lightsaber on the planet. And they reference the off-worlders are no longer allowed to have lightsabers or weapons on Mandalore because of the incident from the last time Obi-Wan Kenobi was there. And the look on and Ahsoka's face and her reaction is like, Obi-Wan got into trouble?
Oh, please tell me it's not so. Yeah.
Yeah. First time for everything. But so she doesn't have her lightsaber, but she comes to their rescue because there's some corrupt police officers there. Almec's got a hood on and he can't be recognized. And she takes, I thought that was a cool action scene. I like seeing her in action there. Just not swinging her lightsaber around 3 or 4 times and putting it into things. She had to be resourceful in combat.
Yeah. Yeah. Do a little bit more hand-to-hand combat. I did feel bad for her though, and I don't know why this struck me, but she used those Jedi mind tricks on the guards,
Mhm.
and ultimately they didn't work.
Right.
And she really put her faith in that, and Almec was basically throwing that back at Ahsoka and saying, "Oh, they've been trained to resist and yada yada yada, and that's why it was such a trap for her." But I thought to myself, "Aw, poor Ahsoka." Like, she really believed that this worked. And I
Yeah,
know
it's
she'd tried it a couple times before.
right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, coming off the heels of it not working when she'd used that clumsy attempt to use a mind trick a couple episodes ago, having it work now, it looked like it worked, and she was just so confident in that moment. But then, like
Exactly.
you said, Almec comes like, my guards are trained not to how does he put it, to resist archaic magics, I think is what he said there. And
Mhm.
but the whole thing was a trap from start to finish. And as soon as she rescues Satine from her cell, because Ahsoka had pretended to turn the kids in so she could get access to the prison after they discovered Satine had been removed from her place and all of her guards had been killed there. And so, first thing Satine's mouth is, Ahsoka, it's a trap. And so, yeah, she gets stunned, and then she has to resist there. And then ultimately she prevails, the little neat trick with the shock collar. What did you think about Satine getting tortured with the shot collar there?
Oh, boy. Well, as Dave Filoni said, she's really had a rough time of it here lately. She's been tried to be killed, 2 different occasions, and now she's being electrified here with the shock collar. Well, first of all, why does such a device exist on a planet that is supposed to not believe in, like, weapons? I think this is definitely a weapon. I mean, if it's considered an
Well, it's not that they don't
alternative
believe in
form.
it's not that
Yeah.
they don't believe in weapons. They don't let off-worlders have weapons, because all the guards have weapons there on Mandalore. That's not so much the issue. And we've seen electrocution multiple times in the Clone Wars. Ahsoka was getting tortured with it by Cad Bane in order to get
Mhm.
Anakin to open the holocron. And then the one Jedi that was Herodian that was being shocked with the prods by the Magna Guards to get information. Eventually, or was just being electrocuted. I can't remember, or both actually, died from being electrocuted to death. So that's something they do. I mean, to me, it's not a whole lot different than using a taser, except for it's a collar and you just have to press a button as opposed to aim and shoot at somebody. And
Mhm.
so there's those things. It still is kind of shocking in that regard. It was not being used
Literally.
as well, yeah, no pun intended. That just came out. It was not being used as a submission tactic. It was used as a torture tactic to try and get her sign this corruption confession, which, she's like, I'd rather die first. And he's like, oh, that can be arranged. So, he is a bit of a mustache twirling villain in that regard.
Exactly. Yes, and I guess no weapons is not what I was getting at. It was more the pacifist idea.
Sure.
But Almec took that and twisted it, as you said, into a torture device instead of something that was being used for defense, I guess, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you got prisoners, you put shock collars on them to keep them in line,
Right.
Someone steps out of line, boom, shock them. And it's more humane than beating them, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have too much more to say about this. It's an episode I liked. It's kind of delivered some conundrums. I think it's got a few logical fallacies, but it gets us from point A to point B. We now, Almec is not done for. We're going to see him again in the Clone Wars, and he's going to rear his ugly head and become a problem again. So this tells us how he got to that point. I think that's like one of the most important things that happens in this episode. But, anything else stand out about it to you?
Yeah, it's a bridge, for future things mainly. But one thing that stood out to me, and you had put this in our notes, that Korkie's friends, one of them, Sony, reminded you a little of KB from Skeleton Crew, and I was thinking the same thing. And so when Dave Filoni was talking about this being a Harry Potter episode, I thought immediately this is more of a Skeleton Crew episode. And I kind of almost half wonder if there wasn't just a little bit of inspiration that might have come from episodes like this that went into designing Skeleton Crew.
Perhaps, I thought the same thing, and I nearly wrote something about that in the notes, but I don't know what John Watts had in mind when he created that. Of course, he had been working on Spider-Man, so he had been doing teenage action heroes at the time. When he had the idea for this. So, maybe it did inspire him. I don't, we can see the connections because we eat, breathe, and live this stuff, all the time. And, rarely a day goes by that I don't engage with Star Wars in some fashion. But I mean, I could see the influence for KB. KB is, of course, a little different. She's the glasses that Sonny has that reminded me of KB. That looks like a headset as opposed to a visor that attaches to KB's head and the like, but still the characters were somewhat similar in the way that they kind of talked and did things. Sony was the one that was hacking into stuff the way KB would.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I agree. It seemed there's some similarities there, and there is a potential influence. Hard to know without a comment from the creator.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing too that I noticed, and maybe this is more of an Easter egg detail than anything else, but when Almec was getting ready to be arrested and he had his head down, did you notice that his hair was in the style of the Mandalorian symbol, basically, that you see on everything? It's like that blonde, but it was almost highlighted in the in the symbol. I was like, oh wow. That's very interesting style choice.
He struck me as a little too conservative for that, but I'll have to look next time I watch the episode. One other thing, if you're looking for Easter eggs and you have time, when they're in the classroom and Ahsoka's giving her lesson on corruption, pause the screen and then look at the big screen behind her, and it's got like all these on the lower left corner. It says like random descriptions of corrupt acts is the header for the slide that she's using, and then as a lawyer, I was looking at this like, this is like the penal code, just reading all these like, titles of different things, like attempting to influence an officer or attempting to, provide false information like that. You really have to spend your time doing some translations there. But I was like, yeah, this is impressive looking, but it's all very generic. It's not really a lesson about corruption at all. But there was if you want to practice your Arabic, that's a really good opportunity to do so. So.
I was going to say, I'm glad you brought that up because I thought about that with all of that in the background. And I kept thinking, I bet Dennis is able to just read this like a second language.
So not quite that fast, but I was able to sit there. I mean, it's much slower than my regular reading pace, but I could read it if I was putting my mind to it. And then once you start reading it, you remember what the letters are, and but you kind of have to warm up to it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm still terrible at reading Orbesh, and I still have that Scrabble game. I need to play it again so I can get better.
all right. Well, then, I think that'll do it for this episode of Podcast Stardust and another episode of the Clone Wars. Thank you for joining us for this rewatch. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Clone Wars. We got a few episodes between now and then, which we'll talk about here in a second. But if you've enjoyed the show and you want to make sure that you get our future Clone Wars rewatch discussions, then go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher choice. If you haven't done so already, we're available on pretty much all the platforms. And so if you find one that you want to use and we're not there, let me know through one of the various contact methods that Jay will give you here in a second. And I'll do my best to get it on that platform. I'd also like to let you know that you can find all the back episodes of the show over on retrozap.com, as well as all the other shows that are currently on the network, such as Enjoy Stuff, Superhero Suite, and the like. And then we greatly appreciate your ratings and reviews. That kind of helps the show get noticed by others. And with that, Jay, I want to go ahead and remind everybody one more time what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found on the internet.
Absolutely. So if you want to do some late night social media snacking, you can always find us, no lack of surplus here, Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And we also have a plethora of Pinterest pages that you can look through for all kinds of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. And we also have, in addition to our other listening platforms, our YouTube and YouTube Music that you can head over to, find the full catalog of shows, subscribe, share those out, and also leave us some reactions as well. So we'd love to see that. And then we also have an email, podcaststardust@gmail.com, looking for listener questions and other interactions and just anything you'd like to do to drop us a line. But we are approaching episode 1000. So we'd love to be able to put that together in some listener question type episode format. So please do that. And then we also have our TeePublic store where you can pick up some Podcast Stardust merch. And if you do, thanks in advance because every one of those purchases does help to support the show. And if you want to know where to do that or how to do that, just hit up the link in our show notes.
All right, upcoming on the show on Wednesday, we are getting into our first edition of World Between Worlds for 2026, and that is a segment where Jay rounds up Star Wars fashion and lifestyle products that she's found around the internet and the galaxy and lets us know all about them. And then on Friday, we'll be wrapping up the week with another edition of Star Wars news, assuming there is any. We'll find out. A lot of breaking news this last week, so we'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. But with that, thanks for listening to episode 988 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.